Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Constructive Criticism. My voice is recording this week, Matt. Is yours?
I sure hope so.
I can see it moving. I can see the knobs turning. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm like legitimately sorry, Matt. That was one of my favorite episodes we've ever recorded,
Yeah, it was. I thought it was pretty good.
and I just feel so bad. Uh, I'm the producer of the show, so like, if somebody's supposed to do a mic check, it's definitely me. And I did not. And I had a lot of things to say on last week's show, but apparently, Matt, you just said nothing.
Yeah, it was just real quiet.
Yeah, it was just real bad on your end. Well, luckily this week I think you'll have a little more to say. We'll be able to post it because of that, and I'm excited to get into this. So before we do get into this week's show, though, I just want to give a special shout out to our sponsor over at Oasis Games. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com. You can get 15% off your first order. And you might be saying, Spencer, no transition this week? And no transition this week. I have something important to say because here in the next couple weeks, we're going to announce the rest of the 2020 Constructed Discord Open Series brought to you by Oasis Games.
Nice. That should be exciting.
Yeah, so we'll have 3 more events as well as the Invitational. So 4 events total next year. You can win some sweet, sweet stuff. Some store credit to Oasis Games. And yeah, it's really exciting, man. I love that, our sponsor has given us the opportunity to do this. And yeah, if you want to join that, don't forget to join the Discord. And we'll have the streamer event probably announced possibly before this episode comes up, maybe a little bit after. So, awesome stuff happening there. And yeah, use the code CCMTG for 15% off your first order. Or you can use the code Would That Be Good for 4% off every order. Wait, no, that's reversed. it's Would That Be Good for 15? I don't know. I don't remember, man.
It's would that be good for? Or no, it's CCMTG for the. Is it 15% off your first order?
See, I'm messing up now.
And then would that be good is 4% off of every order.
There we go. It would be good. It would be good. I don't know how I messed that up. I'm the one that says it every week.
I don't know.
I don't know either. No new patrons this week, but that's okay because something more important happened with Patreon. And I added to the show again this week, Matt. And why do you think I did that?
I think that you probably did that because you liked how it turned out on the episode last week that didn't get aired.
That is one piece. The other piece is I just appreciate this kind of feedback a lot. Like, as somebody that my job is to work with people and get feedback from them to improve the products that we offer at my company. And, this is a product, right? Like, we put out this podcast, and I am certainly not going to ignore this kind of feedback that is so, hey, like, I think you could have done this better. And so 2 weeks ago now, we got a question that was, what is the best way to learn a new archetype? I want to expand my range, but don't really know how to approach it. And Matt, you and I on that episode talked about kind of forcing yourself into these new situations. And, I talked about the quest for 10 and how that helped me. And, we got some feedback from a listener named Adrian that said, hey, I know this wasn't my Patreon question, but I feel like the answers were lacking in this episode. Like, when learning new archetypes, do I just want to pick a deck and play it? Do you watch any streams, read any articles beforehand? Do you ask somebody with experience in the archetype and the heuristics of that archetype, or do you just have someone on Skype with you and try learning to play the deck? This wasn't part of the question, but I'm also wondering personally, what are some common pitfalls that players might fall into when learning new archetypes or decks in general? This is like, hey, I didn't ask this question, but here's what I was expecting myself as a consumer when you would answer it. That's actually really helpful feedback.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I certainly appreciate this more in-depth take on the question, and I wish that I were good enough to have interpreted it this way the first time. So
Yeah, so Matt, why don't you actually start off? We answered the first question, but let's dive into what Adrian's saying, like how he thinks we could have answered this a little bit better. Why don't you kind of take a first stab at it?
Well, so the question that Adrian has is, do you just pick a list and play it? Do you watch any streams? Do you read any articles beforehand? Anything like that. And I think that what's important is you should always access any resource that you have available. Like if you know that there's a great player that streams the deck you're interested in, definitely watch some streams. If you know that there's some articles going up on Star City Games or wherever, then definitely read those. You're just handicapping yourself by not using those resources when they're available. Like, I know, for instance, myself and even a lot of pros would watch Susurrus stream when they were interested in playing War Prison, because he was like, the expert on War Prison, and you could learn a lot from just watching a stream.
Yeah, I think that is exactly true. Like, I didn't do this last week, but I'm interested in kind of going through my process, Matt, and kind of just explaining to you what I do, and then actually just comparing it to yours when we pick a new deck.
Sure.
So for me, the first thing that I do is, I think about a metagame, and I'm like, okay, well, in this metagame, I think these are the type of turns that are important. These are the type of things that I need to be doing in that format. And then if that leads me to the conclusion that a specific archetype that maybe I don't have that much experience with is good, then at that time I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is an opportunity to learn that archetype. And then I'll go in and a good example of this is counterspells being good at certain times in the formats and me learning to play counterspell deck. So I go in and I go look at these blue-white control decks and I say, okay, well, here's the list that are 5-0 recently. Here's the lists that are doing well on something like arena deck lists, and also here's 2 experts or 3 experts that I know on this archetype from Twitter. So, and then I seek out those things. Decide which path I think from all of those sources is the path that I'm most aligned with in my thought process of how the format would check out. And then I go try that thing. Typically, and then whatever resources, wherever I got it from, right? So if there's a 5-0, for example, and that 5-0 is something that I'm interested in, but I know that this person that I know is an expert in the archetype, I might combine the two, right? Where it's like, okay, well, here's where I think the format stands. What do you, as a person that's played this archetype before, think of this list? So Amulet Titan is a great example where, I looked up lists I liked, I sent the list to Mason. Mason looked over there and told me what he thought of the format. I got Drake Sesser's sideboard guide, which you could have gotten. I think it's either his Twitch or his Patreon. I don't remember, but it definitely just a great source, for that deck at the time. And, I think that getting these type of resources and knowing the resources and then also seek them out is kind of what I do. I talk about all of those things that kind of combine into one thing, and then I actually go ahead and play those things, test out my theory, kind of move forward. You don't always have that much time. So, for example, Matt, this weekend in Pioneer, you mentioned that you thought Blue-White was good. I thought about the format, and I thought, it's possible that Blue-White is good. I thought about the format more and was like, you know what? If I think Blue-White is good, I think Ramp beats a lot of the same decks as Blue-White, and then I think Ramp is the better deck. I'm going to play Ramp, and especially if I think it's favored in the matchup. But I think that you kind of have to combine it all. And once you do that, you start to slowly build up those new archetypes. Sometimes it won't work that way, and you will have to do what we said before, and you have to kind of force yourself. But that's kind of my train as I go through both picking a deck and learning a new archetype from the ground up.
Sure. Most often when I'm exploring new archetypes, which, to be honest, happens pretty rarely nowadays. Basically, something has to get printed for that to happen. But yeah, like for instance, Hogak was something that I hadn't really played before it was printed. Like it wasn't even like I don't know. The original Hogak lists were so different from everything else that I definitely had to learn how to play the deck from scratch. And what I think is the first step, almost always, is I will look to see if there are players that are better than me that have any content available, like whether that's streams or articles or anything else, because usually they'll give you some of the heuristics of the deck, like. Certain decks have heuristics that aren't intuitive all the time. Like to take the Hogak example specifically, when you had Altar of Dementia in play, it was correct to sacrifice the zombies first before sacrificing other things to try to hit more bridge from below, so that when you did sack like Hogak or whatever, it would make more zombies. And this wasn't something that was intuitive to me, at least. When I first played the deck, and then somebody at the 1K I was playing pointed this out to me. So I think that basically just getting the resources from wherever you can, and then for the most part, you're just going to learn a lot of it through playing. I know that's kind of analogous to what I said last week, as far as just forcing yourself to do it, but it really is the most important part. Like you can learn a lot from watching other people play or reading articles, but eventually you're going to have to get into it and develop those heuristics yourself.
That was awesome, Matt. Let's talk about the next part of Adrian's question, which was this, the pitfalls that people can fall into. I can go first. So for me, the biggest pitfall is to falling into my strengths. It's really funny because a lot of the time when you're like in business or things like that, people teach you to lead on your strengths. In fact, we actually did a podcast talking about both sides of this. The times where, leading on your strengths is really beneficial, times where it can actually be a detriment to your growth and things like that. And, I find that actually one of my biggest pitfalls in Magic when trying to learn something new is to go back to something that I'm good at. A really good example of this is when I tried to learn Mono Red last year and like really learn it. I'd played Mono Red a bunch when Goblin Guide and Lightning Bolt were in Standard, and that was like the last time that I'd really played a lot of this deck. And I had just gotten so much better at Magic in that time, and so had moved so much forward that I really hadn't tried to reevaluate where I was. And what was happening is I would do all the things that I talked about earlier, and like picking a deck and playing it, and then I'd be like, okay, well, here's the matchups, or I think the best solution is just to go bigger and grind things out. But I think that oftentimes the reason that I felt that way was because I am going to win more of those games, or feel like I'm going to win more of the games that do that. So rather than actually breaking down like the matchups, I was breaking down like what the games where I lost, and thought if I could have done this, I would have probably won, because I'm used to winning when those things happen. And I think that that's a huge weakness. And I think that we do that whether, you're trying to be aggressive too much, whether you're trying to, go for the combo too fast because you think that's how combat decks work or something like that because you're not used to combo, whether you're a control player trying to slow things down too much when you're not supposed to do that. I think we all will fall into those pitfalls in learning new archetypes because we're going to rely on the things that we already do well.
Yeah, I think that's a very great point. It really goes back to the thing that I'm always harping on, which is like understanding what you're trying to do from a macro scale, right? If you're trying to play the aggro deck when you should be the control deck, or where you're trying to play, a super fast combo when you can actually take it a lot slower, it's really important to know on a very individual deck basis what you're trying to do, and an individual game basis even what you're trying to do. And if you're not doing those things because they are unfamiliar to you, or your strengths lie somewhere else, then you're going to be losing a lot more than you should.
Yeah. What about you, Matt? Where do you think the pitfalls lie for players?
So one of the things that I myself do, and that I've seen other people do, is that you'll have heuristics from other decks that you will try to apply to the deck that you're playing now, and it's just not going to work all the time. As human beings, we tend to recognize patterns. Pattern recognition is really important, but when you try to do something new, sometimes you will see something that looks similar and try to apply the same formula to it that you've used before. And that's not always a recipe for success. Like, let's take Amulet, for example. You would generally think that playing a tapped land on a turn when you have nothing to do with your mana is the best way to approach any game. And usually you'd be right, but with Amulet specifically, the bounce lands are so important that sometimes it's even correct to not play a land in order to hold a bounce land in your hand. And certainly it shouldn't be a land that you're playing on a turn when you don't need it.
Yeah. I know that the 1K that we played in the Team 1K, I had a time where I turned to you and asked you if I wasn't even supposed to play my land just because of how important the bounce land was. At the time, like a smart team player, you said, I don't know. And you turned around. But it was something that I had not considered playing the deck. And I think that recognizing those type of things, sometimes it's... Oh, man, this joke falls on deaf ears. Because I was going to joke about, skipping your land drop to...
Sure.
to play your Wrath, but that was on the Lost episode. Either way.
It's in the depths.
Yeah. Hey, Case of Bloodworth. I just mentioned a time where I thought it might have been okay to skip my land drop, so... It's a completely different context, man.
Yeah, this quite a bit different.
But either way, I completely agree with you. I think that too often we try and just apply our base learnings of something else to this to make things faster.
Right.
Okay, well, I just want to say something before we move on. That this is the type of Patreon question and the Patreon feedback that I really, really appreciate. This type of conversation happens because of Adrian giving this feedback. I want to make content that's going to help people improve at Magic and talk about my experiences. Matt, you and I are not the best Magic players in the world. Those people, they live in other places than Utah. But I think that, any time that we can do what we can to help others improve, it comes from this kind of feedback. This is the type of feedback. This is the constructive criticism that constructive criticism needs.
Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate this kind of feedback. I wish that I were, perfect and never needed to have any feedback. Everybody was just satisfied with everything that I said all the time. But this is the kind of feedback that both helps us make a great show and also helps us improve.
Yeah, this is just how we
going
get
forward.
better at this kind of segment, right? Like the Patreon question is only valuable if it's valuable to you, the listener, right? Like,
Right.
I'm glad that you're, donating $1 a month to the show, and like I'm happy to answer your question, but at the same time, like I want you to get that value out of your dollar.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
And yeah, I would encourage people in the future, if you ever feel like there's a question that we didn't answer as best we could have, feedback like this is great. So
yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much to Adrian, and I look forward to any type of feedback in the future. Is just going to make the show better. Speaking of making the show better, let's talk about our new contest, Matt.
yeah.
So always improving. I said a couple weeks ago was going to come through a change, and 2020 is approaching, Matt, and the change is here. So Matt and I will, during always improving, talk about our contest. So Matt, we're taking a look at some challenges. We're taking a look at some local 1Ks, stuff like that, and we will be tracking in a point system who does better in these type of events over the year. Because there's nothing I like better than beating Matt Kling at stuff. So,
I mean, in seriousness, a healthy competition is just really good for growth.
right. No, I think it is. I mean, I think that if there's one thing that like has helped me in Magic a lot, it's probably having you and Quentin around me. Like it's just easily made me a substantially better Magic player than it would have been if you guys were there. So, and Michael too, but whatever, that guy. So the way this will work is you'll get a point. So you'll get a point for a cash. This counts 1Ks and challenges. So our 1Ks, if they ever get big enough, sometimes pay down to top 16. It's not very often. Those are usually like 1.5Ks if they get to like X number of people. And then the challenges, if you cash one of those, it'll count for 1 point. If you top 8, you get 2 points. If you top 4, you get 3 points. If you take second, you get 4 points. And if you win, you get 5 points. And then the tiebreaker will actually be our total cash winnings. And we'll figure out kind of how tickets work later. Whatever we sell, we'll just count $1 per ticket or whatever.
Are we trying to count total cash winnings over all events, or just like all of things that we've done to make money in Magic?
No, just those two types of events.
Okay, so tickets being like specifically from the challenges.
Correct.
Okay, I think that just making the tickets worth $1 and not worrying about what the actual cash value is.
That's what I'm saying. That's
the most sense.
Yeah, I agree. Completely agree. Ticket $1.
Yeah.
Anyway, so with that being said, Matt, how many points did you get this week?
I got 2 points this week.
How did you do that?
I was playing Blue White Control and Pioneer. I was looking at the online meta because they've been posting the prelims, so it's like a lot of pretty good data. And Blue White Control struck me as pretty far and away the best deck this week, at least. So I also noticed that Gabriel Nassif had 4-1'd a prelim with Blue White Control, so I stole his list, and then we made it to the top 8.
So, you and I had the same loss in this tournament. Interesting enough, what did you lose to?
I lost to Dredgeless Dredge.
From David Saltzman, local grinder.
Yeah, and I think that deck is actively great.
Yeah, I got 3 points this week, bringing my total in this contest to 3, one ahead of Matt Kling, and I love you.
Getting crushed.
So this week last week on the show we actually talked about where we thought we were in the formats. It was supposed to be like, here's how the new Patreon only episodes are going to go. If you're in the Patreon group, you actually saw those deck lists. Some of those deck lists. Matt got to post some of those. But I kind of talked about where I thought the format was, and I said I was like trying to finagle my way into like green-red ramp, and I quickly realized that all I really wanted to be is like desert green ramp with Worldbreaker. So I ended up conceding that and playing that at this event. The top 4 of this event was actually I think the event I think was won by David, and then second place was Ramp. I was in third place with Ramp. So Ramp did really well this weekend. I really liked my choice. Um, uh, but overall, I think that this week was kind of a interesting week for Pioneer because I think you and I did a really good job of understanding what the metagame could and would be.
Right.
How do you think we did that?
Well, I think it's important to understand what. I mean, we could go into a whole segment about how you approach an open format, right? Like, because that's what Pioneer is. Once the best decks get banned, right?
Right.
And we've done this segment before, and basically, when I'm looking at a new format, I'm wondering what are the best answers and how can I dodge those answers, or inversely, like, what's the most powerful thing and how do I stop it?
Okay. Yeah, I mean that makes some sense. For I think that's exactly how I approached this, and I think we got rewarded. Is there anything that you learned about Blue White that helped you improve your Magic this week?
I learned that people really don't like blue white, so if it's even close to good, people will hard target it.
So how did you experience that?
I walked into the room and immediately realized I had the worst deck in the metagame.
Would you have realized that if we hadn't played that game before the tournament started?
Yeah, I think I knew that matchup was bad.
Okay. It was one of Mason's questions for me, like, why do you want to play ramp? How do you beat Blue White? And I was like,
Yeah, I mean, I think objectively, like ramp isn't necessarily good against blue white, but that this blue white deck has like almost no win conditions, and the ramp decks that are being played right now have a bunch of on cast triggers. So
yeah. I think that it's a pretty good deck against the control decks, and I think that keeping Teferi in check is a good thing. I also don't. I think this deck has some inherent weaknesses. You mentioned, and I think combo decks just in general are probably just going to have a heyday with this deck.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best way to beat ramp, and always has been just playing a combo deck that they can interact with.
Yep. So that being said, Matt, I also have an always improving moment outside of the contest that I want to talk about.
Okay.
This is something that happened to me a couple times, in this tournament, as well as today on Arena, which is I need to do better about thinking about a second play. This happens all the time. Oftentimes throughout the year, I'll talk about how I need to slow down, and I think that the truth is that oftentimes we need to recognize that we need to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. And this week, I noticed times where I didn't do that and got punished for it, and times where I did do that and got rewarded for it. So I'm just kind of as a way of, you know, promoting always improving. Just want to say that that's something that I need to do the next couple weeks is just looking for a second play. It doesn't have to be going slower or things like that, but not all the time is the right play going to be the first play I think of, or the first play that I see that looks great. And sometimes just checking myself is something that I want to do more this week.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that that's important to realize is that that's a recurring, always improving moment for you, and it really illustrates that just knowing what your problem is doesn't necessarily fix it by itself. Like it's something you have to constantly work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you want to add before we move on to our turning round?
Hmm, nothing comes to mind.
Well, let's talk about 2019 and 2020, Matt, because the year it's over. It's your birthday, by the way. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
I wasn't going to tell people that, but I changed my mind as this. I was like, yeah, Matt probably doesn't want people to know. People are going to wish him a happy birthday, and I was like, you know what? That's fine with me.
Like that's his punishment for having a birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
I got it.
I was trying to be nice, but I changed my mind. I don't want to be nice. Happy birthday, man. I love you.
Thanks.
With that being said, I have a couple things to talk about in 2019. The first being the biggest lessons we learned, and mine fits into our Patreon question this week. I expanded my range this year. I looked at 2019 as an opportunity. I did the quest for 10. Even outside of the quest for 10, I picked up Amulet Titan. I picked up, Bractos Aggro is a deck that I did not think that would be what I'd be grinding with on ladder. I really kind of changed my approach to how I wanted to improve at Magic on this year, and I think it served me really, really well in a lot of ways. I might do Quest for 10 again. And then I think the other thing that I did towards the end of this year is you made a comment towards me this year about how can you not be playing these 1Ks? Like, this is like this is free money. That might not be how you said it, but you just mentioned like the playing more matches of Magic that mattered was really really important. And these are the most important matches that we can play in the place that we're in, outside of playing on MTGO. And that really stuck with me.
Yeah, I definitely still support that opinion. Like, if you are playing matches that don't matter all day, like for instance, grinding ladder, it's hard to get the kind of practice you need, especially practice with dealing with pressure as well.
Yeah.
We've covered that topic on the show before, like how do you deal with stressful situations, and like honestly, the best way to do that is by putting yourself in stressful situations and then learning to adapt to it.
Yeah. Well, those are the biggest lessons that I learned this year, Matt. What about you?
Well, I've done a lot of goal reevaluation, and I think that the biggest thing I've learned this year is that I don't necessarily have to have the same goals that I've had in the past to continue to enjoy Magic. One of my new goals actually is going to have to do with coaching, and conveniently enough, the person that has asked me for coaching lessons has already had coaching from other people before, so like he can kind of help me through it and understand what's expected of me. So I'm pretty excited to branch out into that.
I gotta hear more about this coaching you're gonna do, Matt.
Well, nothing's set up yet, so I don't even want to make like any kind of an announcement or anything. But
Sure. Well, I certainly hope it goes well for you. I know that some of the most impactful experiences in my time in Magic have been some of those coaching lessons that I've done with patrons. So, I hope that goes well for you. Is there anything else that kind of helped you? Any other big lessons you learned this year?
I don't know. Nothing specifically comes to mind, but I'm also really bad at answering this kind of question, like specifically.
I think that's a huge lesson. I think that's something you learned recently.
I think it's something I always knew. It's more something that I've been able to put into words more recently.
Yeah. Well, I think that this show is helping you in that regard. At least I hope that, because I can feel it changing for you a little bit.
It's certainly helping me evaluate the problem. Like back to what we were saying about the always improving. Like just knowing the problem doesn't actually solve anything. You have to actually find a solution also. So
Yeah.
I'm working on that, but baby steps.
Well, let's go something happy. What are your favorite decks of 2019, and what do they teach you, Matt?
I think my favorite deck from 2019 was the Sultai Food deck, and I think the biggest lesson from that one was kind of what we were talking about before, which is that like humans have a great ability to recognize patterns and then try to extrapolate like the same like formulas for attacking each problem. So when I first started playing the Sultai Sacrifice deck, I was playing it basically the same as I would play the Aristocrats back in the day.
Sure.
And at some point, like it was kind of more apparent that I should have been playing a little bit more of a mid-range game. Like the Okos and the Gilded Geese and the Wicked Wolves are still part of the plan.
Right. How do you think how do you think how do you think you can make that transition quicker next time? Like, how do you think you can make those recognitions faster?
Well, I don't think it took me an especially long amount of time. I'm not really sure what the plan is to expedite the process, but that was just something that I noticed that I was doing a couple of matches in.
Sure. Well, that's good. I mean, even recognizing that that you make the mistake, it probably just in itself will make you question yourself next time.
Right.
Is that it? You got no more?
That's all I really got for that. Yeah.
You don't want to talk about Golos Fires?
That was not one of my favorite decks.
Just kidding.
I'm usually not very content when the format is ramp heavy. For what it's worth, Simic Food was one of my favorite decks of the year. If it weren't for the Sultai Sacrifice deck that came out right after that, Simic Food would have been my favorite deck of the year.
Sure. So early in 2019, I got obsessed with a deck. I did a PTQ with it. Should have gone to the Pro Tour from it. I'm bad at Magic. But yeah, Warrior Gruul, man. Like that deck, I fell in love with it. And it was really interesting. You would think that this old geezer who plays nothing but Still these slanted mid-range decks would have, learned everything you could about these kind of decks. That just wasn't true. I actually learned a ton from Warrior Gruul, Matt. Both kind of, I mean, whether it's, Elf Crab Warriors teaching me about how sometimes tempo is still important in these type of decks, whether it's something along the lines of, I mean, even now, Gruul decks are still teaching me stuff with Embercleave, but, just Sarkhan teaching me how to build the deck in different ways, adjust your mana base for things like whether it's Sarkhan, whether it's Goblin Chain Whirler, whether it's Pelt Collector. There was so much packed into Warrior Gruul, as far as like pushing your mana, pushing the way that you build your deck specifically to maximize different parts of your deck, that I don't think that you have the same kind of interaction within your typical like value creature deck.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like Embercleave really teaches this lesson well, which is that life total in these grindy mid-range matchups is a valuable resource, and like you can spend it. And it's not really important what your life total's at until it's the most important thing, right? Like basically, it doesn't matter if you're at 4 or at 20 until you're dead. And Embercleave really hammers that home with, the everything was going great, and then I got Embercleaved, and then I was at 0.
Right. My other favorite deck was the Field Ramp decks, and this actually taught me a different kind of lesson. I talked when we had Caroline on the podcast. I actually talked about like how regretful I was that I saw the list. I thought the list was great for Bant. Didn't play it. Didn't play Bant Scapeshift. Totally regretted it. And then we talked a couple weeks later about like different field decks. Or maybe it was like a month later. But anyway, talking about different field decks and how they were affecting Standard. And I think that and then the Fires deck came out, and I didn't play that at the 1K, and I didn't know if I regretted that, and just all of these things, and then Primeval Titan decks with Field. Like, Field Ramp decks as a genre have taught me a lot this year. And I'm not sure why it has taught me so much about, like, pushing boundaries, but it's just not how ramp decks are typically used.
Right. Yeah. It's. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a history of ramp decks being control decks and having a lot of inevitability, but
not like this though.
What I would say is the interesting takeaway from this is that I think that there was a point in time when you would have jumped on the like the easiest option, basically. Like if it was a deck that you thought could be the best deck, that was something like that you had done before, you would immediately jump to it. Like the Scapeshift deck, for example, would have been a really easy call for you. And I think that you have tried to avoid that so much that you've kind of gone too far the other way on it a little bit.
Yeah, I fixed that this week, right? Like I played that ramp deck.
Yeah, definitely. It's important to realize that, just because you would choose that deck for fun doesn't mean that it's also wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it was really funny this week. People were making comments about like, yeah, if somebody's going to play blue-white in this room, it would be you. And they said it like next to me, and I was like, what is happening?
I don't think that was what they were saying, for what it's worth. I don't think anybody thinks of me as the blue-white player, because like I do it so rarely.
Well, no, it was just interesting that so this is the thing. It's speaking to what you're saying, which is like, I don't like being put in buckets.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that it's weird how often I get put in buckets, and then am weirded out even more when like I'm not put in the bucket that I would want to be put in. It's such like a character flaw of mine, and I think Field Ramp decks taught me a lot about that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think from a more general sense, people are pretty hard pressed to get rid of their first impressions of people. So if you get put into a bucket at one point, like you're basically stuck there for life.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times people have been asking me about Scapeshift over the last year. I'm like, I have not played that deck. I just haven't played that deck. Like, I just haven't. I don't know.
Right.
But those things happen for a reason. But I think that at the same time, I shouldn't avoid playing a Scapeshift deck just because,
Right. Yeah, I think the bigger takeaway there is it's not actually that important what buckets other people choose to put you in, especially if they're doing it for reasons that
it just doesn't matter.
Are not accurate. I mean, it matters if the consensus teaches you something about yourself.
Sure.
But if it's something that's just objectively not true, then
yeah,
it's fine. I mean, if anything, it gives you a strategic advantage by people thinking that you're going to be the ramp guy, and then you show up playing blue-white control, right?
Sure. But it was really, I think, even funnier than that is that the PTQ, the literal tournament we played before that, uh, somebody else was like, "Oh, Spencer's playing Jeskai because he always plays Jeskai." I'm like,
Right? Yeah.
it's just like
People like to do that stuff.
it's so funny. But I'm Snake Guy. Let's be honest. Lotus Cobra for life, baby. Such a snake. That's a shout out to Mason. Let's talk about the podcast in 2019 because man, has it been a year, Matt.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
So we have had 6 hosts of the podcast this year. Wait, yeah, 6. Me, you, John, Seth, Mason, Trey. That is easily. I mean, that has to be the most in a year.
I would assume so.
I don't know if the year that because I think I know that Manny and I did it alone for a while, and then Casey came in, and then all 4 of us. But that was still only ever 5, even at its highest.
Right.
So it's been a year, but that year has been pretty great, and I've gotten to learn from some really great people. And I just want to take a moment during this podcast to kind of talk about what I think each of these hosts brought us that isn't me and you. So I think Seth taught us to trust ourselves in the last year. Whether it's Seth doing well with his blue-black deck, the mid-range deck, or whether it's Seth, even before that, he did well with that green-white mid-range deck, right? So, all of these decks were his own brews, all the way to breaking the format with Simic. Seth taught me that being unconventional is okay, even for the very best players in the world. So often people are just lump these players into just playing the quote-unquote best deck. That's all they're going to do. They're going to play some mid-range deck or some control deck, and that's just not true for some of them. I think Seth really proved that, he and others are not afraid to test the boundaries, and, that's okay, and you're going to get rewarded for it sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you have a keen eye and a reason to believe that the thing that you're doing is better than conventional wisdom, then absolutely try to figure it out. But I mean, also worth pointing out that Seth definitely wouldn't play something that he thought was bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It also helps that Seth is Seth, but I think that if there was something that I would take away from Seth this last year specifically, it's just his ability to do this. And his willingness. I mean, you also have to have a willingness to be wrong, right? You don't come to the right conclusion by thinking you can't be wrong. You come to it by making a lot of wrong decisions, and then deciding, okay, this is the right one.
Right.
So, I really appreciate Seth for that. I think John. I don't know how many people who listen to the show have met John. But I know probably in your little time meeting John, Matt, you will also agree that John is just super process focused. And it really, really rewards him in a way that really captivated a lot of our listeners, captivated me as somebody who was also very process focused. But I think he also showed why certain parts of it are important and why certain parts of it don't matter. He cuts the chaff so often that it makes his process better, and he's always iterating on it to improve. And that is admirable.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing that I learned most from John is just realizing how many talents there are in Magic that aren't even specific to the game. Building a better process is something that you can be skilled at in any field, right? And it's impressive to me how much he's gotten out of that in Magic.
Yeah, it also speaks to me as I adopt this in my job, right? Where iterating and improving the process and getting the process down to have better results is just it's so funny because at my work, so many people are outcome focused, and I'm like, no, I'm going to be process focused and outcome driven. That is going to be how I will work, and it has certainly rewarded me in my career. It is. And I think that is John in Magic, and it has taught. It is John helped me get better at my job this year by being on the show, and I really appreciate John for that.
Yep.
I think Mason taught us to practice what we preach. I think that Mason kind of, like I said with Seth, Mason's not afraid to be wrong. He is not afraid to be wrong. He's not afraid to be questioned. He's not afraid to be. He is. If there's somebody that's going to practice what they preach, put their money where their mouth is, it's gonna be Mason. and I really appreciate that about him. It's taught me to do. I mean, we talk about how we had that swing right with me playing the not playing Scape Shifts and then playing Ramp this week. That swing I think comes partly because of Mason being willing to be that kind of person.
Right. Yeah, I've certainly learned a lot from Mason recently. I've started playing Magic with him a lot more, and he's really good at explaining what he's thinking at any given point, and that's been really helpful for getting an idea of
It's also refreshing that he's willing to explain his thought and also immediately question himself. And like I never feel like Mason is explaining his thought to convince me that he's right. I feel like he's explaining it to me to
help you understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's just how you need to be if you're going to improve his Magic as a group. Like that is just the thought process you need.
Mhm.
And then I think that if there's one thing that Trey taught us this year, man, was he right about a lot of cards we were wrong about. Ogak. I think that Trey just needs a shout out. Dude called it.
Yeah. I think that as you grow as a Magic player, you just get disappointed so many times when looking at something off of a spoiler that it becomes easy to be pessimistic about every card that you look at before you try it out.
Trey didn't do that, man.
No, he's definitely very good at seeing the best possible scenarios for cards.
It's so funny because there's so much more upside to that than the reverse, right? That you would think that Magic players would just gravitate towards the percentage points there.
Well, you know why they don't do that. I actually know the answer to this.
It's because they get punished when they are wrong.
Yes, because being wrong sucks, and you're way more likely to be wrong than right when you're saying that a card is good, because most cards are not.
Yeah, but the upside is so high.
I mean, it's high in that you will win more games of Magic by trying out cards that are going to be good.
Yeah.
But it's low in the social aspect. I mean, Trey is one of the people that's particularly good at this, and he gets like a 20-second shout out for it. Whereas, if you're wrong all the time, nobody's going to listen to you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we all know how Gray makes mass for that win. That's all I'm saying. It was really funny. I posted on Twitter. I was like, "Hey, what should I get? Oh my gosh, I totally forgot to get this Christmas present. I have to go get it at Oasis." Woo! Yeah, I think that I also just admire Trey that he's okay with when he's wrong. Like, he's not gonna get stuck on ideas. Like, no, I think this is good. This is what I'm gonna try. Okay, well that was wrong. Okay, let's go to the next one. Like, I admire Trey for that.
Yeah, definitely.
So I just wanted to take a moment to give a shout out to all of those people, talk about what they taught us this year. It's been an interesting year for CC, but I legitimately couldn't be happier with where we are. And thank you, Matt, for making that possible for me.
Yeah, I do what I can.
Let's talk about 2020. What do you think 2020 might hold for you? So mine's pretty easy. Standard challenges came to MTGO on the day that I like to play Magic. That is like chef's kiss for me. I can build a modern deck for when I want to play modern, build a standard deck for when I want to play standard, and just enjoy my constructed Saturdays. There's a local 1K, I can play those. And also, I got promoted, so I might be able to go to some more GPs, Matt.
That'd be awesome.
And I think that I also have a new focus for this year in proving myself to myself. I'm gonna be pretty open about my goal to become the best Magic player in Utah. That's my goal. Like, I don't care if that means that I'm the 300th best player in the world or the 3,000th best player in the world. But if I'm 3001, that's my new goal. Let's just go. But no, I really want to be the best Magic player in Utah, and I want to be recognized that way. When somebody said that to me, like I said this on the podcast, but it was like, huh. That was a dream that somebody said that to me one day, and you just did, and that was really cool. It's really funny because somebody else said it to me at the PTQ, and I was like, "Nah, that's that guy over there," and I pointed to some guy named Matt Kling. But scoreboard. I think that for me, like, I think that first of all, I am really excited for this competition that we're gonna have, because, like you said, I think that friendly competition, like a good game of Palutena versus K. Rool just brings out the best in people. And you know, I think that one, it will ignite both of our loves for Magic a little bit more. And I think that that is kind of what 2020 is going to hold for me, and also kind of a new focus. You know, I've been splitting my time a lot across a lot of different content this year, and part of that was trying to get a grasp of, you know, of where I was at in Magic. You know, I've told people that I'm looking for a host for not Arena Decklist, Arena Mythicast, and that I'm not going to be doing that this year. What?
That's just the Arena deck list thing. That was funny.
Oh yeah, it was great. But you know, with me not doing Mythic Cast anymore and things like that, I think that I can be more focused on CC, and just the type of content that I want to be doing, and also kind of improving myself at Magic at the same time. It's going to be really important to me this year.
Yeah, those all sound like great things to try to work on and look forward to. For 2020 this year, I think I'm mostly more working on different things within Magic rather than just gameplay things. Like I was saying, I'm going to try to work on the coaching thing and more just like content stuff, just trying to give back to the community more. So
it's like a whole new world for you, Matt.
I know there's a lot of room for improvement for me for that.
You would think
I'm really
after
excited.
Starting multiple Magic podcasts and stuff like that, this would just be like a thing that's true about you. But the truth is you always just done this because you love me.
I mean, that's not necessarily
I'm just kidding. Come on, take my hyperbole. Let's go. But like, you know, I think that, you know, to have this other side of you come out that I always knew was there is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that it should be a lot of fun. And like I said, I have a lot of room for improvement. So, you know, always feedback is welcome. And yeah.
Well, the podcast has some stuff coming too. We got new tokens in the work. How's your token coming?
I have not talked to Casey about it recently.
He sent me something on mine.
Yeah, I know. He started working on Obi's token first, so...
Well, he gave me a sketch of mine. He's getting me a sketch of Obi's. So we'll have a Spencer and Obi and a Matt token coming out next year. It's really cool of Casey to be doing this. Super shout out to him. I'm really excited to give those out to all the patrons. It's going to be super, super awesome. Then also, I announced this last week in the Discord, or not in the Discord, in the Facebook group, but we're going to do monthly hangouts. So it's just going to be me. I'm not roping Matt into this. If he wants to join, he's always welcome. But I'll be hosting a monthly hangout where, you know, it's just an actual hangout. Like, whether it's us just talking about the podcast or whether it's us playing Super Smash Bros. Like, the Constructed Critics group and Forward, we'll get a monthly hangout day. Once it's full, it's full. But it's really exciting. Some of them will be actually about the podcast, about how we can improve it and stuff like that, and kind of taking what Adrian did and putting it into a kind of a more of a process. But it'll be really fun. And then obviously, Matt, the 2020 season has begun. We already ran our first tournament early, but we'll be running those Discord opens. It's gonna be sweet.
Yeah, this should be awesome.
So
I'm also happy to join any of the monthly hangouts that I'm free for. So
cool. That's good to hear. I didn't want to rope you in, but I'm
no,
happy to hear that you're excited.
It sounds exciting. Yeah. Also, it would be pretty disingenuous of me to set goals to, you know, be more content oriented and you know, trying to help the community and then not do the one
those.
thing that's pretty easy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once all of our patrons get to switch and play Smash, it'll be super easy for us.
Oh yeah. Just hang out, do the monthly hangouts every day.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, all right, monthly hangout today. Let's go. With that being said, that's gonna do it this week. You know, 2019 was really fun, dude. Like, I appreciate Seth, I appreciate John, I appreciate Trey and Mason, and I appreciate you. And I mean, 2019 was different for me. Like, I was very focused on work, more so than probably ever in my life, and I loved that I got rewarded for that. But you know, I now have an understanding of what my expectations are in my new world, and I'm excited to focus the time that I have on this show and this podcast and what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So,
I'm very happy for you for your career advancements, by the way.
aw, thanks, man. Is it cooler than being 30 though? Because like you, dude, are like I hear 30 is the new 20. So
Yeah, that's what they tell me.
yeah, can we just get a hair shake here, everybody? That I mean, no 30-year-old has hair like that. There we go. Yeah.
Luscious locks.
Well, you can join the conversation on Patreon. If you become a patron $5 or more, you can join the Constructed Critics group. That's at patreon.com/ccmtg. You can find me at Spencer13H. You can find Matt at The Witch Gling. You can find the show at ccmtg on Twitter. You can support the show, like I said, on the Patreon or over at Oasis Games. Also, new T-shirt coming out in 2020 that will be in our swag store. If you go to constructedcriticism.com/swag, you can check out the swag store, and there will be a new T-shirt specifically for 2019 or for 2020. Sorry, announced in the first show of the new year. So be prepared for that. You can also join the Discord. Like I said, we'll have those open tournaments every quarter, as well as the invitational from those opens. So check that out and check out the announcements over on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/constructed criticism. And like us on Facebook, check out the podcast there, on YouTube, everywhere that you can get it. It means the world. And yeah, that's going to do it this week, Matt. But typically, Matt, we would have a deck doctor at the end of the show. But we didn't get the one this week because we recorded early and I didn't post until, right before the show. So we're actually going to do a deck doctor on my deck from the 1K.
Okay.
So the list that I played at the 1K was 2 Walking Ballista, 4 Boreal Grazer, 4 Elvish Rejuvenator, 1 Thoughts Not Seer, 1 Golos, 4 World Breaker, 2 Ulamog, 8 Ugin the Spirit Dragon, 2 Spatial Contortion, 4 Nissa's Pilgrimage, 4 Hour of Promise, 1 Hedron Archive, and 27 lands. The important lands are 4 Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, 1 Scavenger Grounds, 2 Sanctum, 2 Radiant Fountain. I guess I'm just going to read them all. 4 Austin Oasis, 7 Forest, 1 Desert of the Indomitable, 3 Castle Garenbrig, 1 Cascading Cataracts, 1 Blaststone, 1 Arch. And my sideboard was 2 Ajani Offshoot, 2 Damping Sphere, 3 Unravel the Easter, 2 Corsair Crucifix, 1 Tireless Tracker, 2 more Thought Not Seer, 2 Oblivion Soar, and 1 Emrakul the Promised End. Now, I'm actually going to let you go first on this. What do you love about this deck, and what would you change?
So the things that I really like about this deck are the 4 World Breakers and the 2 Ulamogs. I think those numbers are actually very solid. I actually also really like the main deck, Thought Not Seer. I pretty much love the whole sideboard, other than Damping Sphere. I'm not really sure where that's good.
It's supposed to be good in the mirror, but I don't know that I like it.
That doesn't sound right. It's a symmetrical effect. How could it be good in the mirror?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Okay, so anyway, I don't love the Damping Spheres in the sideboard.
I certainly don't like it against the Twiddle Storm deck either.
The only other card that I really don't like in the main deck is I don't think that the Golos is very good.
Okay.
I think that I can appreciate the ETB effect of it, but I think that the 7 mana ability is actually a little bit superfluous when you already have 4 World Breakers and 2 Ulamogs, since like most of the time when you're activating the 7 mana ability, it's in a matchup where you kind of need to generate cards and grind a little bit more, and you just already have so much top end that I just don't think you need that ability. It's possible that the ETB is just like powerful enough that that's just the best version of that effect, but I don't believe that's true.
Well,
I imagine we can find something better there.
Let me tell you a story. So, couple things. I will do a deck tech on this deck, so if you want a very, very in-depth, this is exactly the list that I would play next week. I'll be doing that here soon. It might be at the same time. It might be up when this is up. Anyway, the first thing that I will say is a Boreal Grazer is gas, but you definitely need more 1-mana effects in this deck. So the lists that started doing well had either an Elvish Mystic or a Llanowar Elves, or some had one of each, going up to 6 effects. I believe 100% that at least a 5th, if not a 6th, is correct. And now there are even mono green ramp decks. I posted one by Joey Adrain that he for when the prelim, he actually didn't play any of the Boreal Grazers, instead going for the Elvish Mystic Llanowar 4 of each route. And there are actually a lot of lists that are actually playing Cavalier of Thorns, Matt, as instead of Golos. And I like that a lot better.
Yeah, I could certainly believe that one's better. I like the recursiveness of it without really asking anything of you.
Right.
and I think that the ramp is fine. Like obviously, it's not quite as good as just grabbing any land out of your deck, but it's still
Here's
it's
the
gonna
thing
hit
though.
something pretty reasonable most of the time.
Anytime that you put a World Breaker in your graveyard, you're gonna be like, I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest of all time.
Sure.
The other thing is I actually think it's almost trivial to get triple green in this deck if you want to. I already wanted another forest. I think that Cascading Cataracts can become that pretty quickly once you're cutting Golos. There's just, I mean, and I also think that like once you do that, you just don't need Radiant Fountains. You have a 5/6 in your deck, so it's like good
Right.
luck attacking.
I also definitely buy the idea of playing Mana Dorks over Arboreal Grazer, since we're not trying to play Fielded Dead anyway. Like the only land we have in the deck that even matters if our mana is produced by lands rather than creatures is Shrine of the Forsaken Gods.
Yeah, I
Um,
actually disagree with that a little bit. I actually do like the Arboreal Grazer route still. Uh, I think that while it will cause you to mulligan slightly more, I could be wrong though. I could believe that this other version of the deck is better, but that is not currently where I'm ending up. I will be playing more 1 mana cards, and that could be a split. It could be 3 Grazer, 2 or 3 1 mana dorks. I'm not sure, but I have found that Nissa's Pilgrimage plus Grazer is actually quite powerful.
so one thing I do like about the Grazer is that it really makes your sideboarding against like aggressive decks not be so pointless.
Right.
I think between Arboreal Grazer and Jotty Offshoot and Corsair Crucifix and like to a lesser extent Thought-Knots here, you actually have a pretty nice transformation against aggressive decks.
Yeah,
And
it's
if
true.
if the Grazers are elves, it's a lot tougher.
Yeah, one of the things that people did to fix that was actually play Lovestruck Beast out of the sideboard, though. So if you're playing the elves, you can get Lovestruck Beast, and then it's like chef's kiss.
Sure, yeah, it's not bad.
So it kind of just depends. The Thought-Knots here in the main is another one that I'm not 100% sure where it lies, but I expect that a combination of these two decks type together is actually just a great deck, and I will be doing a deck tech on it in the future. Cool. Well, that is going to do it this week. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. If you want to submit a deck doctor, go to patreon.com, become a patron, $5 or more. Join the Constructed Critics group. Our Constructed Critics makes this possible, and a super shout out to our Constructed producers. You mean the world to us. Thank you, everybody, so much, and we'll see you all next week with another episode of Constructed Criticism.
See ya.